Good morning to everyone attending, and a very warm welcome to these webinars, to the Future Mine and Minerals Conference Tallinn. So my name is Lisa Ek. I am a management consultant within the mining and minerals industry, working from Luleå University of Technology in Sweden. And I will be your host for these 2 days. And the Future Mine and Minerals Conference Tallinn is an initiative by the Geological Survey of Estonia. We have Taltech and we have the University of Tartu in a collaboration with the Nordic Publishing. And Nordic Publishing has been doing the Future Mine and Minerals Conference in the Nordic for the past 10 years and is thrilled to be part of the first one in the Baltic states. We have around 180 registered participants for these 2 days, because we will meet both today and tomorrow for some of you, and some of you might just be here today, from over 13 different countries. So that's quite impressive. So again, a very warm welcome to all of you for being here. In a perfect world, of course, we all would have been in the same room. We would have been able to meet each other, to mingle, to make new contacts. But due to these very strange years and a very strange pandemic, this is not the case we can go for. But a physical conference is still planned for this September 21st to 22nd in Tallinn. So please just watch our webpage to see if we're able to meet then, and fingers crossed we will. So just to walk you through a little bit around these surroundings we are in for this 1.5 hours today and 1.5 hours tomorrow. If you want to ask questions to the speakers or to the panelists, you have a function called Q&A, so questions and answers, on the very bottom of this Zoom webpage. So if you just move your mouse around a bit, your pointer, you will see where you have the share screen and the raise hands and so on, you have a Q&A function. So if you want to post questions, just press the Q&A and post your question there. And maybe it will be me who will raise it to the panelists when we walk into the panel discussion. Or it might be so that some of the speakers want to answer your questions in writing in the Q&A window in the function. We also have a chat window. A chat function is just next to the Q&A function. So if you want to just say hi, welcome, maybe say hi to a friend you see in the participant list or so on, use the chat function for that. And as a final thing, this whole session will be recorded. So if you want to go back and watch it afterhand, that will be possible. And also if you want to spread the link to colleagues or friends or so on, that will also be possible. So with that, first off today, I want to introduce you to Sirli Kulli, the director of the Geological Survey of Estonia, and she will give us some context and an introduction to these 2 webinars. So welcome, Sirli, and I leave the word to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Wakey, everyone. Good morning, dear guests. On behalf of the organizers that are the University of Tartu and Tallinn University of Technology, together with the Geological Survey of Estonia, it is my true pleasure to say, welcome to Estonia. Welcome to Tallinn. Oops, I got it all wrong. Sadly, we are not all together in Estonia. We are not all together in Tallinn. Like we actually planned in early 2020 when we first met with Jan Ots from the Nordic Publishing Sweden, the head organizer of the conference. It's true that during the past year, we have postponed the event again, and then again, and then again. Like very many conferences during that period have done during the raising COVID positive numbers. Finally, our dear Jan shared his brilliant idea, and based on that, we decided to have very short and concentrated open webinars today and tomorrow as a kind of teasers for the actual conference Lisa was mentioning that will hopefully take place this autumn in Estonia in real life. Now, to go on, we all know the alarming situation with the growing number of critical raw materials in EU. At the same time, we all know the many flashing and promising slogans claiming that the EU will reach the carbon neutral economy in certain years with a tremendous increase in using the wind turbines, the solar panels and electric vehicles. We have all heard about the green future. But there's much less talk about the fact that a truly secure way for meeting that nice green goal comes only through increasing the mining of local ores and increasing local production of metals inside the EU. And by increasing, I mean increasing in a remarkable amount. At the moment, our green dream is highly dependent on very insecure supply of raw materials from countries where the environmental rules and health and safety regulations are much lower than ours. Our green dream is therefore dependent on insecure supply of processed metals, components and assemblies for renewables and e-mobility industries. So what can we do? How can we reduce the risk? How can we help the EU to lower the number of critical raw materials? And what can we do to get the Europeans finally to say, yes, I do allow to mine the local resources in my backyard with an environmentally safe way, with a clear recultivation plan and with a maximum valorization solution. Easy questions, huh? Well, I'm very pleased that today we have in the panel Mr. Nicolas Arvenitidis and Mr. Saku Vuori, representing two countries, Sweden and Finland, where, according to the latest surveys, majority of the people are saying yes to local mining. Wow. Now, where are those local ores that we should focus on? And what are those critical raw materials that we could mine here in Northern Europe and in Estonia? I will not spend any more minutes because I must say I'm very enthusiastic to hear on the same topic our today's speakers, Chris, Olli, Alvar and Lauri. So dear speakers, let's start. Grab a coffee and the screen is yours to share.
Okay, perfect. So the first person is the one we can really say good morning to, because you are a couple of hours ahead of everyone else here. So to introduce you to the very first, Chris Cann, welcome. You are the Head of Research and Intelligence at Aspermont Limited. And you are here today to talk about the Northeastern Europe in a global risk context. So we are really looking forward to this, and the screen is all yours.
Thanks, Lisa. Just going to share. Please let me know if this is working. Can you see that?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so thanks very much for that introduction. Yeah, Aspermont runs something called, amongst other titles, Mining Journal, and we have a World Risk Report. And within that, we have what we call our Investment Risk Index, which is a jurisdiction by jurisdiction rating system. Last year we covered 111 jurisdictions. So the perspective that I'm offering will be very much where Northeastern Europe, but also Central Europe and Northern Europe sits within a global investment risk context for where investors should feel comfortable placing capital. And as we've already heard, that capital is needed quite desperately to develop the raw material wealth in Europe to support the green objectives. So a little bit about our investment risk index. So this is kind of what it looks like. The difference between what we're doing and what you see in the market usually is that it's not survey based. So we have a survey, it's weighted at 20% of the final score, making up 80% of the overall score are established risk-related metrics like the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business or the Fund for Peace Fragile States Index. And we combine those for a score. So the values from the perceived risk, they come from the survey. And then we have hard risk, which comes from those established risk metrics. So there's less volatility, it's less subjective, essentially. We do it over 5 categories. They're all weighted differently based on industry consultation. The heaviest weighting is for the legal category, then governance, fiscal, social, governance, social, then fiscal, and then finally we have infrastructure at the bottom. So there's a lot of weighting at the very top there on the mining code, which is legal, and then governance as well. So each jurisdiction gets a hard and a perceived rating. They're combined for a score, and you get AAA through to D. I know that's probably a lot of information to take in. If you want to contact me about how that works, please do, but we're short on time, so I'm going to jump straight into it. So this is what it looks like when you look at Northern Europe, Central Europe, and Eastern Europe in a kind of global context. So we put in there Europe averages, the world average, and then what we would call safe havens as well for a bit of context. So you can see 2 distinct pictures being painted here. One of Northern Europe, which sits comfortably in the realm of safe haven jurisdictions, with all except Greenland, which is arguably not really Northern Europe anyway, rating better than the average for safe havens. Meanwhile, Central and Eastern Europe not only fall well short of safe haven status, but they lag Europe and are even slightly below a world average, which includes emerging economies from Asia and Africa as well, which is probably a little bit of a worry. So going into a little bit more detail, looking at the legal score to start with, this is weighted at 40% of the overall score, and it's informed by largely our partners at MineHub, which provide the only legal analysis of mining codes around the world. And this is combined with the survey question that we run on mining codes. So Northern Europe is still well ahead of the rest of Europe. It's very good in a global context, and it's in line with the average for other safe havens. We'd probably say, guided by MineHub, that scores of less than 50 indicate a reason for concern from an investment perspective. And that's unfortunately where most of the jurisdictions we cover in Central and Eastern Europe sit. So the shortcomings are generally because of discretion and subjectivity that allow ambiguity and uncertainty to creep into the process. So this doesn't mean that mining codes won't work necessarily. It just means that they're vulnerable, and when a weak code is combined with poor governance, that generally spells trouble for miners and investors. So moving on to governance, and it's a similar story here. So it's weighted at 25%. It's made of the Ease of Business Index and MineHub's Corruption Risk Index. So having strong governance is important because it can have a stabilizing effect on other risk categories. So first, it means the chances that the mining code will be implemented correctly are stronger. And second, it means that inherent respect for mature and robust institutions generally is a positive for the social risks that we'll get to next. So Europe in general has strong governance led by jurisdictions in the north. Central Europe lags the Europe average but beats the world average, whereas unfortunately Eastern Europe here lags both. So getting on to that social picture, once again, not too dissimilar. Social is weighted at 15% of our investment risk index. We use the Heidelberg Conflict Barometer, the Fragile States Index, and population density as well, which is a really simple metric, but important. And these are again combined with the survey for a social rating to kind of get an idea of social unrest or conflict, or at least a potential for those. So yeah, again, similar picture, Northern Europe out ahead as a safe haven. But this time it's Eastern Europe keeping pace with the rest of the continent and beating the rest of the world, while Central Europe sits a bit further back. So at this point, having covered off those three very heavily weighted categories that we look at, it's probably worth pausing for a minute just to acknowledge a couple of outliers here in Russia and Serbia. I think for Russia, ministerial subjectivity and the lack of transparency generally mean investment is at greater risk, unless you perhaps know something or someone that others don't. Serbia, on the other hand, meanwhile, has been a consistent outperformer. And I think we've probably seen that with more investment dollars flowing into that country. So fiscal, quickly, fiscal, we look at corporate tax, mining specific taxes and royalties, etc., state participation and then GDP growth. And that's weighted at 12.5% of the overall index. As you can see, the numbers tend to be fairly flat compared to the other categories and don't necessarily marry up with less risky jurisdictions overall. In fact, jurisdictions that don't have the expertise to tackle what we would consider more serious risks in the other categories often drop their taxes and their rates as a quick fix to attract investment. And the anecdotal evidence that we have is that this is not sustainable. It ends up going back the other way and ruining reputations for jurisdictions. So higher rates are generally the price one pays for doing business in more secure addresses. But here, even Northern Europe manages to outperform. And finally, we look at infrastructure. Northern Europe, obviously, an exceptional place to do business and be a miner and invest capital. What we look at here is our mining journal transport index, which looks at railroad and port facilities. And then we look at energy security, which is pulled from the World Energy Council's Trilemma Index. And again, combined with the survey, but this is only 7.5%, so quite a light weighting on the overall survey, on the overall rating for a jurisdiction. So what we found here is that a common element of mining safe havens is low population density, which is a factor in our social numbers. In North America and Australia, that low population density is chiefly a function of just a massive land area, which then has to be serviced by appropriately reliable infrastructure for industrial mining operations. And that is obviously a huge investment and a big challenge for those places. Hence the kind of middling infrastructure numbers that you can see for safe havens compared to the other categories. Northern Europe has this utopia, again, of having a relatively small land area, but also low population densities. And it's relatively easily serviced. And so it performed exceptionally well. The other outlier here, you see here, is Greenland, which I don't think actually to this point has a sealed road or rail, obviously. So it struggles on infrastructure. So they're the categories we look at. This is how it looks over a 4-year trend just before. I know my 10 minutes is fast approaching, so before I'm timed out. I think the positive note to end on here is that when you look at where things are trending, overall we're looking at a falling numbers, which, you know, from a risk perspective you'd suggest is good, but the way our scoring works, we want numbers to go up. We want improved investment security. And if you look at the world over 4 years that we've been running this, we're consistently seeing year-on-year marginal drops. We're seeing risk increase. And this is particularly in places that we would consider safe havens. So the scores are still strong, but safe havens are coming off a little bit. And you can see this when you look at Finland and Sweden, which are coming off. Sweden in particular has come off a lot over 4 years. Still very good, but not as strong as it was. Whereas you look at more emerging jurisdictions that have more work to do, we are seeing some improvements there. So Poland, Serbia in particular, Bulgaria, Russia, all making some improvements, which is good to see. I think I've got some more there, Lisa, but I think I'm out of time. Do you want me to carry on, or should I leave it there?
No, I think that would be perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. Very interesting. So let's move ahead in our very packed schedule. Next out is Olli Salmi. You are the Managing Director of EIT RawMaterials Baltic Sea. And you are here to talk about a very, well, let's say current thing, that is the European RawMaterials Alliance for a more resilient and greener Europe. So we're really interesting to hear about that, and the floor is all yours.
All right, thanks so much, and thank you for the invitation to speak here today. So indeed, Olli Salmi, and I'm running the Baltic Sea Innovation Hub of EIT RawMaterials out of Finland. We look at Finland, Sweden, and the Baltic countries as a region, as a whole, within EIT RawMaterials, and I'm sure that many of our partners and good friends are here in the call today as well. In addition to that, I also lead a cluster within the European RawMaterials Alliance. That's a cluster on materials for energy storage and conversion. And the talk of today is really focusing on ERMA, the European RawMaterials Alliance as a whole, and what we are trying to achieve there, and hopefully linking that then to the potential of critical raw materials in Northern Europe, as was mentioned in today's topic. So just briefly, what is the European RawMaterials Alliance doing? So this is an initiative as part of the European Industrial Strategy that was launched early 2020 by the European Commission, that highlighted the good example that we've seen of industrial alliances in Europe from the European Battery Alliance. And following that, then a number of alliances, new alliances was positioned in this strategy, and one of them, of course, the European RawMaterials Alliance. The alliance is indeed owned by the European Commission, but they've then appointed the EIT RawMaterials to coordinate and run the alliance and on behalf of them. What is the point of the European RawMaterials Alliance? Is really to secure the supply of raw materials both within Europe and outside of Europe, both from primary and secondary sources, into the most important industrial ecosystems in Europe. We are doing this in terms of a public consultation. I'll go into the details in a minute, as well as a range of investment cases. So what we see here is increasingly the focus of the European Commission, and thereby also the European RawMaterials Alliance, in the raw materials sector, focusing really on getting things up and running all across Europe, installing capacity and really securing hands-on the supply of critical and strategic raw materials, I might say. So we have today, I think the partnership is growing by the day. So these numbers are from a couple of weeks ago. I think that now we are around 500 partners in ERMA. We have received a number of investment cases through our investment pipeline. We'll mention that briefly in a second, dating to about a bit below 10 billion euros until 2023. So just going back to the basics, so why are we doing this? And of course, if you look at the critical raw materials foresight study provided by the JSC and the European Commission, of course, there are still number of how would I put it, very familiar critical raw materials that are behind these technologies, then again serve the industrial ecosystems in Europe that are fully dependent on them and are also very capex intensive. So changing this game doesn't happen very quickly, and as we've seen, it also hinges upon very long and fragile value chains that we've seen with the latest chip discussion. So a lot of this is also tied to very long value chains and fragile ecosystems. So this is really a case in point where we try to address the most important industrial ecosystem. So we have elected eight of them, including mobility, electronics, digital, renewable energy, aerospace, and defense. That really the ERMA activities and the investment cases would then support at the end of the day. What this boils down to then is a number of course in Europe, numbers of value created and number of jobs, and this is really the point. So this is not only serving a niche industry in Europe and a niche set of shareholders, it's really a great amount of jobs that we're talking about for the European community, as well as value added into our economy. And this is what matters. If we look at some very concrete cases that ERMA is focusing on, of course, we started off from rare earth elements and rare earth magnets and motors, if you will, and there is a clear move in that field as well these days. I mean, you might remember this is not a new discussion, so we had this discussion for more than 10 years ago when the whole rare earth discussion started, their element discussion started, and things like EIT RawMaterials and EIP RawMaterials were started. That's, you know, we were already talking about this, but now it has indeed re-emerged, and the automotive industry and the energy transition as a whole is a key driver there. So if we talk about the e-mobility and electric vehicles, it's not only the battery that is there. When you have a battery, you need a magnet, and you need an electric motor that has this magnet in, and that has a significantly more precise projection now on the consumption of all those rare earths. And currently, I mean, there is not a single rare earth, heavy rare earth separation plant in Europe in operation. So this is something that we are missing indeed in the value chain. But we also talk about other a bit further down the road. So if you talk about electrolyzers or fuel cells and the raw materials need there, you are facing similar kind of trends. So if you look at iridium as an example, that has been very or fairly stable in the past years. Now, of course, with a expected electrolysis capacity for 2030, we are again looking at a doubling of demand here for very scarce and strategic raw materials. Now, how does ERMA go on about these challenges then? So we have what we call clusters. So we have the rare earth permanent magnets and motors cluster that is quite far already. They presented the action plan last week in a seminar. Then we have the raw materials for energy storage and conversion one action plan being published in November 2021, and then, you know, starting or ongoing discussions, of course, on what other clusters, what other specific needs would we have. And the idea here is that we engage really with industry, with NGOs, with universities, with research institutes and other government officials and other stakeholders, really to put together a roadmap of challenges and how to solve those challenges towards the aims of securing raw material supply into Europe. In this case of specific actions, I mentioned it's investment cases, so there is indeed a target of really growing the investment pipeline for important projects. And we've of course seen already in recent news, different member states are announcing that they have big projects going on, driven by the industry, funded by the industry. So of course there is a lot of appetite right now for this, but we have roughly in a stage where the funnel of 40, a bit over 40 cases is now being put through our investment. But here we are also continuously, there's an open call, continuous call for this. So please visit the ERMA website if you have an investment case in mind that you'd like to submit to us, and we'll take a look at that. If you look at the potential that we have right now in the cases that we have, if you look at the concentrates for rare earth mining, look at the separation, look at magnet metals and actual magnet production. So of course, if you pace that against the 75 kiloton magnet scenario in Europe, for you know, both for wind cars and other industrial applications, we see that we do have an impact, but there's still a lot to do. So of course, for the all the way upstream, we can approach quite nicely already the demand, but then for the metals and magnet part, there's really a lot of technology and production still missing in Europe, and we hope to get more activity in that field as well. If you look at the more traditional, with the maybe the battery value chain, there, of course, for graphite, lithium, nickel, and cobalt, we see similar numbers in the ERMA projects. So with the projects in pipeline right now for lithium, it would nicely cover roughly half of the European estimated demand by 2030 for nickel, cobalt, and especially graphite, it's much less. So we are in the beginning and looking ahead, and it looks promising, but still, of course, this is the time when we really roll up our sleeves and start to work. if you look at where these cases are located, especially on the rare earths, of course, it covers quite nicely the European map, and it also puts a finger on the topic that there are activities, there are projects, and there is a demand for rare earths, battery grade materials, platinum group metals for the hydrogen, as mentioned, also iridium, copper for electrification, but not forgetting then more traditional metals and base metals, aluminium, magnesium, titanium, for lightweighting of things. And if you put this, vis-a-vis the other critical and strategic raw materials on a broader scale, then you have a similar map. And of course, boiling and going back to the question of, well, what is the role of northern Europe and Baltic region? It is quite clear here in this map. It's not only the very upstream prospecting, mining, but increasingly, of course, processing and then even end production. So with the last slide, and excuse me, Chair, I'm a little bit extending my time here, but really, what are the ERMA actions? So do increase European capacity, both primary, secondary sources, which of course means then that we would need to increase our recycling rate, off-spec recovery in reprocessing from facilities. And of course, to be able to create a level playing field against non-European competition, this is something that would, at the end of the day, of course, decrease our import dependency. And then what will follow out of these outcomes, of course, is that we do increase our self-reliance, will be able to be more competitive, will have a better control on sustainability and responsibility in sourcing, doing it this way, reducing or increasing the resilience and reducing the risk of these long and fragile value chains, and of course, at the end of the day, create the jobs and growth in Europe that is so important for us and that is represented by the sector. So thank you very much. That was a quick snapshot to ERMA. Please get back to me if you want to know more, and we'll talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Olli. And just, you have over 100 attendees here now. Just a quick question. What type of investment cases are you actually looking for in ERMA? Sizes and so on?
So we have, I didn't go into the details of what kind of instruments we have within ERMA that we are using there, but that varies quite a lot. So we have, for instance, EIT RawMaterials has its own funding, and there are funding that is suitable for startups and for smaller projects. But then if you go for the real big ones, and this is a good deal of the ERMA cases right now have quite large capacities from 100 million to 300 million. So these are not small projects, and of course they require a completely different approach than installing a smaller process or a pilot with the million. But we see be short here, we see everything from a couple of million to then all the way up to 340 million.
Perfect. Thank you. So thank you for that nice talk. And now we will move ahead in the schedule. And now we will hear something as excited as an Estonian example of earth resources critically on the doorstep into the new era. And that is with you, Alvar. Warm welcome. Let's see if you can have your picture and your sound.
Yeah, thank you. I try to get my picture now running.
It looks perfect.
It's running, yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, good morning, everyone. It's I will give a very short kind of picture from the perspective of a small country to these resource criticality issues. If we look at the big changes within last 2 years, of course, for Europe, the Green Deal is one of very good pictures, and but also other countries doing more or less the same. These industrial countries, and they are really much concerned about the economies. They are concerned about climate changes and pollution and so on.
Alvar, do you like to share your slides, or do you just want to talk?
No, I asked, do you see my slides?
No, we can just see your picture on yourself.
All right, I try to get the slides as well.
Yes.
So if you pick up, yep.
I thought it's there, but yeah, okay. Now you see my slides as well?
Yes.
Okay. I was talking about Green Deal and all kind of these nice issues there. It's a good initiative. And some of the people know also that these resources, metal resources, earth resources are not really considered to support this thing. And another big change was, of course, again, within 2 last years, which kind of changes we don't know. The final changes are probably quite far out of our understandings, and this is not just affecting economy. But anyway, what we know that at least geologists and mining people and more public is also getting into the picture that to get more into the green and more, I would say, better future, we need to mine more, unless we have a much better technologies compared to those ones what we have at the moment. So we are talking, I'm not talking about these numbers of increase in mining for nickel, graphite, rare earth elements, cobalt, lithium, but those are on a top list, definitely, because those numbers are changing, and those numbers are not 20% for some metals. There are percentages like 20 times and on. So this is a concern which has not been really clearly considered even in the European Green Deal business. Just refreshing this, the last update of European critical raw material list, and it's still rare earth elements on the top with highest supply risk, and we all know why this supply risk is so high. And world is changing, and world powers are also changing. And when US and Japan actually made their first list, something less than 20 years ago, European community made the first list in 2011. China was already 1980s doing their first kind of calculations how to get these world resources into. But I was thinking, what is from the point of small country, and I was attempting to define a critical mineral as an Estonian case, and that list of European raw materials is not, it's not really doing anything with Estonian industry or Estonian kind of national security, and I think it's the same case for quite a few other countries, small countries as well. It's a very simplistic sketch. So in axis we have importance for industry, or it is the same as national economy. And on a y-axis, I put this public acceptance or political risks. So we're not talking about imported materials. We're talking about the materials which are within a country. But even within a country, you have this supply risk, which is related to public acceptance. And public acceptance has been changed, and it is still changing in quite many cases against mining. So for Estonia, oil shale is the highest risk at the moment, but oil shale has been also for Estonia kind of energy dependence, and now it's oil production is related to oil shale and Estonian export as well. Limestone, dolostone, gravel, sand, it's kind of construction materials for last 200 years and more. So it's we can't live without those things. So they are important, they are crucial for Estonian economy at the moment, and there are small industries related to clay and peat, but they are they don't have kind of very high risk from the point of supplies. But if we put on another possible resources what Estonia has, we see that this red in red letters, those resources are mostly also already in a high risk, not mined, or we have exploration work for some of those things, but they are already publicly in a very high risk because public is against the phosphorite mining. Probably not to say that it's a very against, but it is still say 50-50. We have lots of metals from black shale, including also uranium, thorium. We have a glauconite as a potassium reserve, and we have plenty of base metals from crystalline basement. Estonian crystalline basement is very similar to Sweden or southern Finland, kind of Bergslagen type, most likely most of Estonia. So there is a big challenge, especially for phosphorites, because Estonia has the highest or biggest phosphorite reserves in Europe, and Estonian phosphorites are also containing lots of rare elements. So we have things to think about. But there is another way of development, and I know there are groups of people who support version 3. We do nothing, we do mine nothing, and that's a happy life. Okay, we are not concentrating on that, but even the world predictions, this graph is, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, made the predictions actually say what resources have a highest supply risks for 2030, and phosphate rock is very high. I think if you make a new graph, you get also another elements in that graph in a very high section. But just as example for Estonia, I would say that fertilizers import. I do just fertilizers because we have enormous phosphate resources and we are not using it, and we have a potassium resource. So is those numbers 2019, 2018, are those numbers high? It's a small country. I would say this 160 or 180 million euros as to pay for import is actually you can make a comparison with Estonian annual research and development and innovation funding. So it is more or less the same amount. So this is a huge kind of challenge. And here I put these red dots for those elements in European list. Estonia probably will be able to support, of course, phosphate rocks, phosphorus, but we are also producing niobium and tantalum in our plant, which has tens of years of history. We have lots of magnesium, and we have rare elements related to phosphate. So there is a good and big and nice challenge to go. But of course, we have to consider all alternatives, and I put these 4 possible alternatives. The first one, we do nothing. We go under the sea mining. There's lots of elements, battery elements as well under the sea. We go for planets, and we go for kind of very small scale artisanal mining back. So it is quite largely also related to public acceptance of these activities. So thank you.
Thank you, Alvar. Very interesting. And you will stick along here, and if someone have questions for you, we can raise it in the panel after the discussion. That's correct?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So you talked a little bit about phosphorite and black shale resources. And now we will move into the next speaker, who will be a little bit down that path. So I want to welcome Lauri Juuso, Senior Geologist at Geological Survey of Estonia. Hi, Lauri. We can see you in your camera as well. So the floor is all yours, and your talk will be about heading towards a renewed look at Estonian phosphorite and black shale resources. So interesting.
Hello, everybody. Can you also see my slide now?
Yes.
Perfect. So for me, it's very nice to continue after Alvar. So my name is Lauri. I'm a senior geologist. And now I'm going to give you a brief overview of what we are doing regarding Estonian phosphorite and black shale resources. To begin with, there are significant phosphorite deposits in northeast Estonia. So in 3 deposits, Rakvere, Tools, and Aseri, there are altogether about 3 billion tons of phosphorus ore. And if we include the surrounding prospect areas, there is estimated another 8.5 billion tons. So in northern phosphorite deposits are covered with black shale. There is no defined deposits in black shale, but considering today's topic, I think the most interesting elements in black shale are molybdenum, vanadium, and uranium. But we have documented several other elements that have also elevated concentrations. Briefly about the history. So these 3 deposits I showed you have been identified by extensive drilling that started around 1950s and ended about late 1980s. During that about 30 years of drilling, thousands of drill holes actually have been drilled into phosphorus-bearing unit, mostly phosphorus and main pollutants like iron and magnesium have been measured and documented. We have also few measurements of rare earth elements. Unfortunately, all of the cores that were obtained during this drilling have been not preserved, or to be clear, we have a small number of cores in poor condition. But all this work has been documented in detail in different exploration reports that are stored in Geological archive as in a paper format, but the digital versions as PDF are now available in Geological Fund webpage, among other exploration reports that are preserved in Geological archive. Now, our work began with digitalization of these all main phosphate exploration reports. By digitalization, I mean we extracted the main information about the chemical measurements, the stratigraphy, and drill hole locations and elevations. And all of this information we extracted into table format. So altogether, we have over 6,000 drill holes right now in our database, over 50,000 lithostratigraphical contact boundaries. I mean here that in each drill hole, it has been identified lithostratigraphic bodies, and we have digitalized also this info. And regarding black shale, there is a little less info we have, but still about 4,500 single samples. During this validation and digitalization process, we have had some tackles. So we took look really into the conversion of coordinates, because during historic exploration, different coordinate systems were used. So if possible, we recalculated these coordinates with the help of Estonian land board. But if this was not possible, then we used different georeference maps. In few years ago, 26 phosphorite drill holes was actually found in nature, and the location of these drill holes were remeasured. And based on these remeasurements of these 26 drill holes, we can say that the average error from the calculation and measuring the location is about 30 meters. We double check also the collar elevation with LiDAR data, and we see that about 50% of drill holes, the difference is less than 20 centimeters. But here we have some quite significant outliers that we still have to work with. During the stratigraphy validation, we made a different checks in Excel to avoid any gaps in between the formations and overlaps at the same time. And of course, visual checks are always done parallel to modeling. And regarding the chemical samples, we picked 1% of samples in each report and double check the values to evaluate the quality of digitalization. And we can see that usually the error margins are around 1 or 2%. So this is pretty much where we are on our database buildup. And now we're on the phase when we are doing the first 3D models. So this is the view from to the modeling area. Here on the lower part is the Gulf of Finland, because the view is from northwest. And here are the younger bodies outcropping if we move to the south. And now I'm going to zoom into Toolset deposit. Here are the single drill holes shown with assay values. And as you can see here, in the Toolset deposit, the lower part of phosphorus-bearing interval seems to be most enriched, giving higher values. And the values decrease towards upwards. Now the yellowish layer here is modeled ore body with 8% P2O5 cutoff with minimum thickness 1 meter. And this is covering quite evenly most of the area, but we have a few holes where the values are lower. And this is the one buried valley that crosscuts the Toolset deposits. Now jumping to Rakvere deposit, as we have digitalized also all formations in overburden. You can see, for example, that in the middle here is a Viivikonna formation that contains oil shale that is mined in northern eastern Estonia. On the top of is quaternary sediments that also fill buried valleys, and these buried valleys also crosscut occasionally the ore bodies. And on the left side, you can see the Aseri fault. And now the red color on the bottom is 15% cut-off ore body, and the bigger, wider is 8% cut-off ore body. If we now zoom into this only phosphorus-bearing interval, again, we can see there is a single assay values given here. But unlike Toolset, in Rakvere deposit, we see that highest values are concentrating on the uppermost part of phosphorus-bearing unit. And again, similar to previous slide, the yellowish color represents the 8% cutoff, and the white color below is current sandstone or where the values drop below 8%. So this is kind of a brief overview where we stand regarding the digitalization of historic data and building up the 3D model of our phosphorus and black shale deposits. But parallel to these works, we have done drillings in 23 locations in last year and this year. These 23 locations cover all 3 main deposits, and we are planning from these cores to get in detail geochemical data, look more into rare earth elements to understand what's the potential of these and what are the trends and concentrations. From the selected cores, we also do petrophysical measurements. But these works are still on the way. Unfortunately, I don't have much to talk about these results yet, but we hope to publish the results next year. So I was quick. Thank you on my side.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lauri. So now we will move into our panel discussion. So first of all, thank you very, very much for the 4 speakers we have had. You have been listening to Chris, you have heard Olli talk, you have heard Alvar, and now you just heard Lauri. And the 4 of them will also be around for the discussion if you want to pose questions for them. But now we're also joined by 2 panelists. We have Nicholas Arvanitidis and we have Saku Voiri. So if you 2 put on your cameras and let's just give the audience a bit of an introduction to the 2 of you. So Saku, do you want to start? Just give an introduction to who you are.
Yes, thank you. First of all, it was nice to get invited here. So I'm acting Director General of the Geological Survey of Finland at the moment. Just last week, there was a new, the new Director General was appointed, so I'm stepping down in the 1st of July and back to my normal position, that is Director of Science and Innovation in GTK. Thank you. And I'm a geologist as a background.
Perfect. And Nikolaus, welcome to you as well. Just a short introduction to who you are.
Good morning. You don't hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, good morning, everyone. Happy to join you this morning. Well, I'm almost between all my working time, I've been between Greece and Sweden. So I spent my university time in Sweden, back to Greece, working for Geological Survey of Greece. Again, back to Finland, working for the Geological Survey of Finland, and ended up in Sweden at SGU. Currently working for the Ministry of Innovation and Enterprise in Sweden. And I've been joining several working groups, mineral working groups in Brussels, and also some of them related to Eurogeosurveys, the organization where all geological surveys join and are members.
Perfect. So I have 2 broad topics that I want to discuss today. And I think, Alvar, I will put some questions to you and to the other speakers as well. But to start with you, Saku and Nikolaus, if we look at the critical raw materials, and we have Northern Eastern Europe in mind, what type of vision or ambition do you see when it comes to the outlook for critical raw materials? Saku, do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I think it should be mentioned that many of the critical raw materials are side products of the, let's say, traditional major mining streams. So I'm not too eager to separate these things, and I think it would be wise to focus into the whole entity of material supply to societies, and how that should be done in a most sustainable way. And I think our expertise as a geoscientist is crucial here. So I hope that it can be provided and applied. So and what comes to the resources, we do have plenty of resources in Sweden and in Finland. So I think we are in a crucial position to make things right.
Nikolaus?
Well, actually, I think northeastern Europe, they have has a great potential of critical raw materials, and I mean battery minerals and permanent magnet minerals that are very important and needed in running this very key strategic technology value chains for Europe. And also, I would say that having this critical raw material secured, then I think the ambition would be to develop a full-scale operation of these value chains in up here in the Nordic countries in Northeastern Europe. So not only looking on the resources, on the raw materials, but also be able to proceed downstream and fulfill the whole strategic value chains.
If I may add a little bit, I think that one of the fundamental questions is that how much we are willing to use materials and energy in order to become a carbon neutral societies. And I guess that, well, we have been doing a little bit research in GTK. Simon Michaud, one of our research professors, has been counting that what is the size or the scope of the whole energy transition from the raw materials point of view. And it seems that if we would like to phase out the fossil fuels, that's the much larger task to what we have even understood at this point. So we need a lot of raw materials, even the basic ones.
Exactly, that is very true. And just Nikolaus, you are onto something very, very interesting there when it comes to value chain, because historically in the northern and the northeastern part of Europe, we have been sort of a raw material supplier sending it to other parts of the world. So what do we need to do there to actually move ahead more downstream? What do you see?
I think talking about Northeastern Europe, I mean, we know that Nordic countries, Northeastern European countries, they do get together and join efforts in terms of based on own resource capacities and related mineral development perspectives. And they do see things from the point of view of value chains. I mean, we know that traditionally, historically, all these countries, they are mining countries. They are suppliers of raw materials. Lately, we have some new business coming in terms of battery manufacturing, gigafactories, getting online very soon. I know that permanent magnet manufacturing is also in one of the main interests in the Nordic countries. So things are happening, I think, not only in the mining sector, but also downstream in the value chain.
Mm. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So Alvar, I want to pose a question to you, if we can get your camera and your sound on, because you are very much part of this context for the Estonian and the eastern part of it. So how do you as an insider see the vision and ambition for critical raw materials when it comes to your region?
I think that our region is very essential to support the European issues, and we are related to Europe anyway, so we need to develop our resources to make them ready, because what I see as the most threatening things in our world is that kind of these national security issues are increasing in importance, and the world power is a little bit changing already, and COVID is very good kind of power to drive these fast changes also in technologies. And as Europe has been, I would say, behind maybe 20 years if you compare to China and strategies China has developed from 1980s. We have to catch up. We are not able to catch up. Even USA says that it's not able to catch up China, but we have to secure our resources. I would say that we have to focus on our resources, which we know, and put more efforts on exploration and making those resources, which we already know, available.
True. So what sort of... Yeah, sure, Nicholas.
Yeah, I just wanted to say here that one thing that it's very important and different this time, that we're dealing with new groups of minerals, and that brings about new resource technology challenges. We are now talking about battery minerals. We are talking about permanent magnet minerals, not the traditional industrial metals we were used to work with in the past, like base metals, precious metals. They are just part of the game, but there are also new groups of minerals coming in, and that changes a lot how we do things and how we will do things in the future.
Mm. Exactly. But to just develop there a little bit, what challenges or risks do you see that we will not be able to reach this picture or this vision that you have all talked a little bit about? Alvar, do you want to start there? What risks and challenges do you see?
I would say the major risks we have is kind of, I would say, related to general policies, and we don't have agreement in those policies, and within European Union those resources are left for every government to deal with. We need definitely more organized policies to secure our resources. Of course, as I told, we have another options as well to make a general, very big breakthrough in technologies, and we don't know though. We don't need those resources, but at the moment we don't have those technologies, so we need these resources. I would say we need a major breakthrough on a top level of politicians, and to define that target. Otherwise, in European Union, there are many small countries which have different industries, like Estonia. But even those countries, usually they have mineral resources ready. And everything is related also to, I would say, kind of public acceptance, as we know that mining is not in favor, and it's the groups are increasing who are actually against any mining in every country. It's not just the case of certain countries. So we have to put a lot of power into kind of, I don't want to say PR activities, but popularization, or just giving scientific facts instead of emotions to those people who are against these things. We have to do things together. We can't, we don't have power to let everyone to do their own things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we got a very specific question for you, Alvar, when you were done with your speech in the questions and answers. So that was just, which stakeholder groups do you see actually are demanding the stops to the mining?
I don't want to say that they are stakeholders groups, but in every country, even in Finland and Sweden, it's top world countries in this kind of resource management, are increasing number of groups who want to stop mining, and they go back to, I don't know, 100 years back or something like, or think that we can avoid mining and still have very good mobile telephones, changing those telephones every year. So I don't want to name any groups specifically, but they are not stakeholders groups. It's, the public groups.
Yeah, very true. So Saku and Nicholas, over to you, because Sirli talked a little bit in her introduction about Finland and Sweden being countries where public acceptance is rather high. And I mean, I am living in Sweden, and I know that is maybe the case compared to other countries, but we also have a challenge there, both in Sweden and in Finland. So public acceptance, what is the challenge there, and how can we work with it? Nikolaus, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think actually there are some surveys in Sweden done at university, at different universities in Sweden, showing that still there is a positive opinion, a public opinion for mining in Sweden, and that's good. But I think we should look at this problem from a broader perspective. I mean, we shouldn't just talk about mining. I think mining is part of the package, of the whole package of green transition, of climate neutrality. Yeah. And I think in the past, I remember that RawMaterials were the missing link in the climate debate. But now, not anymore. I mean, things have been changed. If you go to climate change and climate webinars or discussions, you see that in the agenda they do have the RawMaterials aspects included. So I mean, the public opinion, the public awareness, we should try to communicate in a way that we take the RawMaterials as something we need forward to achieve the climate neutrality goals, to the energy transition, the electrification, all these things. So not just discussing the mining sector as an industry, but discussing the mining sector as part of a big change, reform the society, the economy is going through.
Good, thank you. Saku?
Well, if you allow, I would like to jump from the challenges to the solution part of the story.
Please do.
We have this Finnish network for sustainable mining. That is a platform for different stakeholders and the industry. And I have heard a lot of good comments. Of course, there's issues. It's not always easy to run that platform, but I think the existence of the platform is the stake here, and that aims to share information, experiences, advance and the building and the introduction of more responsible mining practices in Finland. And I could mention the guiding principles where all the platform members have been committed to. So one is transparency. Then you share best practices and continuously improve your activities, and then minimize any negative impacts of operations, respect the surrounding community, safeguard the vitality of the areas of the mining operations, dialogue with the communities, and sustainable use of mineral resources in general, and how to close the operations when the mine is closed. So those 9 things are, let's say, the cornerstones of the sustainability with regards to the platform.
Okay, thank you. So Chris, you are still here as well. If we can get some picture and your sound on as well. I mean, you talked about the risk perspective, and this might be a curveball question to you, but you have sort of a global context to this. Have you seen any best practices or so on when it comes to reducing risk in the terms of public acceptance and how you work with that?
No, no, there's no silver bullet, unfortunately. I think the industry hasn't done itself any favors either. I think as an industry, it's been getting better and better in terms of the kind of things that we're just hearing about there, and sustainability practices, best practices, looking ahead, looking into the future around closure, all very key things that communities and the public are very interested in. But at the same time, then we let ourselves down with things like the Brumadinho disaster, Yukon Gorge in Australia. And these create kind of immediate, overnight, multimedia campaigns against mining that are very difficult to compete with. So I think there is probably a shifting trend toward an understanding, as has been discussed, around the fact that raw materials do go into things we use. I think that's probably been a byproduct of social media and a greater transparency. We've had to answer publicly, very publicly, a lot of the challenges. We've had that opportunity to answer those challenges, but I think it's going to be a very, very slow-moving evolution for public opinion to change what is a legacy view on mining. And I think more likely what's probably going to happen here, there'll be various legislations that are coming into play at the moment that will give stakeholders and communities the confidence they need that the mining industry is doing the right thing around responsible sourcing, etc. But yeah, unfortunately, there's no easy fix.
No, thank you. Interesting perspective. Do any of you want to comment on that? Okay.
Well, I think I think they all understand that we are in a way to reshape the industry towards circular business models and be more resource efficient, run green energy-driven ecosystems, try to raise the need for policy updated innovation. And I think they all understand that the industry is progressing, and the industry has a vision, has an ambition to try to respond to the needs, which are the minerals intensity is just growing for every day. And if you look, all the planning and all the demanding issues, they are related to the next 9, 10 years. 2030, it's a very important milestone, and in just 9 years to that 2030 milestone. So I mean, it's 10 years is the time it takes for an exploration, advanced exploration projects to get in the mining stage.
Yeah.
If I may add one comment. So one of the things or the research areas that we are doing now at the GTK is that could we roll out some kind of traceability tool that is based on trace elements or isotopic fingerprints. So that could be one of the tools that should be in the toolbox when you're looking at the transparency and traceability and sustainability at large.
Yeah, good. So just Alvar mentioned earlier policies, processes more from a European perspective, perhaps. But Nikolaus and Saku, coming from two different countries, very active within mining and so on, how do you view that thing? What do we need in terms of policies, maybe permitting processes and so on? Saku, do you want to start? How do you view that?
Well, I could mention a couple of things. First of all, now we just was 1 year ago we launched the battery strategy for Finland, and that covers the whole value chain, starting from the primary production to the recycling I guess that's the way to advance things, cover the whole thing and the sustainability issues throughout the chain. And of course, then there's the permitting, so that needs to be timely and so that you can expect the results. So how you can prepare your applications and anticipate what is coming down the line. So time frame is always critical. It's costing a lot of money to explore. So and actually, if you think of the flip side of the coin, so the local communities are also eager to have results from the let's say authorities quite soon, because they are feeling a bit perhaps afraid of what is going on. So as it's not serving for any of the stakeholder purposes if the permitting takes a long time. So I guess there is a joint let's say enthusiasm to make things better. And what comes to the Mining Act of Finland, it's now under drafting. We will have a modified version of it in the late of this year, I think. That should address some of these topics.
Sure. Yeah. Nicholas?
Well, I think things actually are moving forward in terms of policy and update and things related to permitting, even in Sweden. I'm not so familiar with the details. What I know and that has been discussed is the need for maybe updating the mineral strategy, which is from 2012, having in mind the changes in the field of circular economy, in the field of critical raw materials, and so on. So I think we should expect things to be also launched in Sweden in that field.
Okay. Thank you. I want to get you, Olli, back on screen. So if you can put your camera and your sound on. You have heard some discussions now over the past half hour approximately, the vision and the ambition for critical raw materials, both mining and also doing activities further down the value stream as well in the Baltic region, the Nordic region, and so on. So how are you from EIT Raw Materials and from the IRMA working with this subject?
Well, of course, as mentioned, the activity is there and the drive is there, and we work continuously with the Nordic countries, with the Baltic countries on IRMA, both in the policy process where representatives from industry and research institutes have been very active, and also the investment pipeline. What I wanted to highlight here, and I also answered in the chat there for the questions, is really on the sustainability part. And this is interesting. It's something that has come up in the stakeholder consultation part, and we had a meeting last week when we had a big group talking about anything from batteries to fuel cells and solar. And there really, what is highlighted is not exactly technology, because I mean the non-European competition is roughly on the same levels. I mean, it's really hard to compete with technology really if you go upstream. It's also really hard to compete on demand, because we simply don't have quite enough in Europe in many of these raw materials. It is the sustainability that we can compete with, and this seems to be something that the industry highlights all the time, and how that is done, and we can show the smallest possible footprint of what is being done in Europe, but also what is being brought into Europe. And there, the traceability that comes up every now and then in the discussion probably needs to be taken forward in a more harmonized way. So we have a lot of initiatives on traceability, but really, what is going to lead it? How do we harmonize that? Those technologies and those methods, it's really something that would be needed. At the end of the day, it's, we have good initiatives like the battery regulation that concretely puts some demand on the sustainable sourcing of raw materials. But is that enough? And what is the actual methodology to do it? So we are yet to see it. And final comment here, at the end of the day, and going back to what Chris said, at the end of the day, regardless of the carbon footprint that you demonstrate and the traceability that you demonstrate, you will end up a hole in the ground if you have a mine. That you can't avoid that. And there, as Chris said, it's always going to be tough. And there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like it. And this debate needs to be entertained at all times. And we need to have this dialogue in each member state according to their own regulations. So as you mentioned, there is no European-wide mining regulation in that sense. So permitting is done on the member state level. So there, I mean, these discussions need to be taken on the cases with the local community, and that's the only way to have it. And at the end of the day, it's a decision of what we want to do. And these are tough decisions, because the hole is going to be there, and whether it's going to be there for the European good, it's a very tough decision, and there's no silver bullet from that. But I'm sure that we entertain this type of the dialogue that we're doing in the Finnish mining network. I think that's a good start, and we should definitely pursue that.
Perfect, thank you. And you have also, you received a question in the Q&As, you talked about that a little bit, and you have answered that in writing. I saw that, so that was perfect. So we just have a couple of minutes left for today, and Saku, I have a finishing question for you, or were you able to answer that? Let's see, it's in the Q&As. Do you have any strategy for developing non-ferrous small-scale mining and its productivity?
Well, I guess I could mention that the industrial minerals in Finland has been a rather stable field of industry, and I would be happy to do something about it to boost its let's say production and so on. But I don't have any silver bullets, I'm afraid. And we might be running out of the silver if the solar panels are consuming all the silver, so that might be tricky as well. And actually, I need to mention that the battery strategy was launched this year, not last year, but there has been a lot of progress, so I was a bit confused. Yeah. Already, I mean, a lot of good news from that field.
Okay, so the word of the day, there are no silver bullets, so we just have to work hard, and we have to cooperate and see the mining industry as part of a future solution, not a past problem, probably. So with that, a million thanks to you panelists and to all you speakers, and thanks to Sirli for introducing the conference. And most of us will be here tomorrow as well, and I really hope all of you listeners and attendees will be here as well. So the same time, the same place, but new subjects for tomorrow. So hope to see all you people there, and a million thank you for today. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks for this, Lisa. Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.